So when I first started my teaching career, one of the advice that I got from, veteran teachers was CYA. And I wondered, how do I do that in my career? And they said, document, document, document. So what I do in this whole conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is I bring you what I mean decades of experience from vets on exactly how to have this conversation. So shout out to my mentor teachers who literally have put me in this position where, as a scatterbrain, I can still do the one thing that is necessary for us to gain clarity in this conversation of the bad PC ports. I want to point out what I think is the other side. In my last few videos, I talked about how, patch notes reveal to us that developers are having, challenges across the board, even on console and PC, where they come back and patch their games after it's all said and done. At the end of the day, I also showed another video where Digital Foundry was giving high praise to 3 PlayStation PC builds. Basically, those games moved to PlayStation, and in quote, the ports were, in a sense, reviewed very well. They were pleased by the ports, and they actually had significant and meaningful performance aspects to them, even better in some cases than the console. These games were Marvel Spider-Man 2018, God of War 2018, and Horizon Forbidden West. Another thing that we also noted in that video was every time a port is broken or when a port is good, the developers usually have the responsibility and the onus. But today I wanted to point out something else that shows the other side of even PlayStation itself having bad ports, and something that you must pay attention to when it comes down to this, because even at the time, the so-called PlayStation fans, the ones that are right now trying to make it seem like PC is not a good place to play because PlayStation will get some stable ports over a PC, they use this particular argument in that regard. So, what game was this and what scenario was this? This was, ladies and gentlemen, The Last of Us Part 1 and its PC port being dead on broken at launch. Even at that time, Digital Foundry's Alex came out and actually created a new way of actually making and doing his reviews. I'm going to play the first 30 seconds of his review that came back to actually review the game after it had been fixed, which is an argument that I made in my first video that given enough time, developers can come back and fix their games, even though you may say that it's the PC's fault. It's actually the developer's own fault.
Last of Us Part 1 launched on PC at the end of March. We at Digital Foundry found the quality of the port to be lacking in so many areas that we forewent a standard review and did a 3-way playthrough instead, discussing the various issues. Since then, many more unfinished games have been launched, and I have since developed a good way to review such troubled releases that I did not use for The Last of Us Part 1. In the meantime, though, Naughty Dog and Iron Galaxy have been patching The Last of Us Part 1, and I thought it was a good time to give an update on the current quality level in comparison to launch.
So, like I said in my very first video when we talked about this, I showed a series of patch notes from various studios on various games. NetherRealm's Mortal Kombat 11, Capcom's Dragon Dogma 2, the studio, I can't remember the name, that did Callisto Protocol, and others as well who have put out multiple patches. Even Jetpack Interactive and Santa Monica, they have their patches that they put out for God of War Ragnarok. The whole idea that a PC port comes from the platform itself is a new one. I've not ever seen anybody that has drawn this conclusion except until now, where people find it convenient to use it for the console war. And even at the time that The Last of Us Part 1 had bad, reviews in its PC port, I remember very clearly that a lot of people also tried to use it to console war as well. They were like, oh, The Last of War Part 1 is PlayStation's port, blah, 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 blah. But I was looking at the time going, this is a gross misunderstanding of exactly what's going on here, simply because the developers who actually made that PC port are quite notorious. They're not necessarily, one of those developers that we can just pretty much say, okay, they've done a stellar job for all of the ports that they've made, or they have a record that is akin to Nix's. Now, these guys have been making a lot of ports in the past, but I also remember them. They also helped make a port of one of my favorite games. And all this while, developers have pretty much been at the forefront in basically their scenario where they're responsible for every single game that they make and how that game performs. So let's bring this conversation to light. Developers have different circumstances that they face. They have, publisher mandates. And if they cannot meet the publisher mandates, they usually find themselves in a pinch. I think one of the more interesting developers that we can look at today is Iron Galaxy. Iron Galaxy did, with Naughty Dog, did the PC port for The Last of Us Part 1. It was both of them in this case. It wasn't like Nixxes. So what I think happened here was the Naughty Dog that you had working on this port with Iron Galaxy more than likely didn't have good coordination, possibly didn't have enough time. At the end of the day, both studios were able to come together and get a port going, but the port has had, in my opinion, a very negative effect on the game. However, over time, the port has improved. The whole, conversation that was, in the public eye at the time was that the port was bad. But one thing we always know is it's never been because of the platform. It's just the developers just did not drop a solid game at the end of the day. So once everything was fixed, no longer are you hearing about these problems. So looking at Silent Hill on PC and talking about the performance challenges, I've seen some people take that and say, well, it's simply because of the PC platform that the performance is bad and all the above. Like, look at this. But at the end of the day, it's all about the game being poorly optimized. And believe you me, nobody wants an unoptimized game. But at the same time, this is, in a sense, seemingly isolated to a small number of people who are talking about it. Or maybe the Silent Hill fans just don't care and they're just going crazy and still playing the game anyways. But one thing that I also want to make room for is, even most people have said that Blubber Team, which is a small studio at the end of the day, this is probably one of their first few goes at it in terms of making a game. They're kind of a smaller studio. I've seen a lot of people say that when I made the video talking about Silent Hill and how it was having some performance challenges, some of you went ahead and said, that Blubber is a small team. Bloober, I guess that's how you say it. And I don't hold them, in any kind of disdain or whatever it is. I'm just saying that we need to come to the understanding that it is based on, at the end of the day, the developer themselves and what circumstances they're developing in. Until Dawn remake, that game was running at 30 FPS. There were bugs and all of the above. And I remember it being a PlayStation game, and it was Ballistic Moon who actually did the port for this game. At the end of the day, you really have to point that it's the developer's challenge that's actually being, that's holding the game's performance back, or the circumstances that they developed the game. So at the end of the day, we really have to make sure that this conversation has all the nuance put into it. I've also talked about how Epic Games' Fortnite has one of the best performing, games out there in terms of Unreal Engine. Well, that's because they simply have the expertise. I've also pointed out a scenario where I saw an Unreal Engine evangelist. He was actually doing a talk on optimization. And I remember when he was doing that talk on optimization, he made a statement and talked about a for loop. This is in programming. Oh my gosh, I am not a programmer. You guys don't even do this to me. Those are your programmers. You better not laugh. A for loop is a set of complex codes a complex code base or a code module that can execute specific, tasks that are complex. That's how my, buddy who's a programmer explained it to me in the most basic, most stupid, simplest forms. Because I was looking through some code and I was like, why'd you write a for loop here? And he gave me this really wonderful explanation, but my brain only translated to the thing I just told you. Apparently, if you write these for loops and you're just loose with them and you're going crazy with how you write them, they can actually impact the performance of your code. And I remember when he was talking about that and, doing the talk and said, a bunch of devs will call us and they'll, tell us, hey, our game is buggy and our game is having problems. When in reality, they did a bunch of for loops all over the place and now their game's code is actually running poorly. Sometimes optimization will fall straight on the lap of the developers themselves if they don't actually get the job done. I was accidentally playing an Unreal Engine optimization talk, which they have many of them, that try to give gamers a lot of, developers, a lot of information on how they can actually balance their game development, their code. And I think at the end of the day, it takes a lot of, it really does take a lot of planning from ground up. This is Game Thread. Oh my gosh, this is a very complex scenario for any game developer, but it's one that I'm really interested in. Not like I can actually do much, but I'll be happy to find a developer who can do this. I once heard of a dev somewhere in the Slavic East who's a beast at doing this. And I really want to get my hands on that cat. Believe you me. I mean, it sounds all weird and we're just putting it that way, but with the way optimization has become a big challenge for a lot of different, developers, people who know how to do this kind of stuff, they are heavily sought out right now in the gaming industry. And I don't think, these big studios can actually get enough of them in their studios, because these games are making up big, massive games, and they need more and more of, these folk to be able to bring things to a good balance in terms of performance. Okay. I think this is probably going to be the last video I'm making on this topic. You're probably going to see somebody that will come up with some random, thing and want to point to PC and all that stuff. But, ladies and gentlemen, let's not go crazy when we're trying to, oversell the platform that we play on. I know everybody loves their platform. They will all try to oversell it. But, there's way more that's going on in the background in terms of this game optimization that is not even close to the hardware, because I've seen, when I saw the Switch doing 60 FPS, that's when I knew that, for real, if you really sit there and grind, you can get a game running at beautiful performances. Now, hey, the game you're going to get is going to probably be different than you could get on, a bigger hardware or more powerful hardware, but you could get it there. You're going to make some sacrifices, but, it'll get the job done. Talk to me in the comment section, folks. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Got to go watch a movie. Appreciate y'all. Peace out.